ever seen an old man smile right before unleashing chaos? Because that's exactly what I saw when Grandpa stepped onto his porch that morning. His faded overalls were drenched in sunlight, his straw hat tilted low, and his eyes locked on something that didn't belong on his land, a shiny black SUV parked right over his private property sign. At first, Grandpa thought it was a lost tourist, but when he got closer, he saw the sticker, HOA Enforcement Director, slapped proudly on the windshield. That's when the corner of his mouth twitched, not in anger, in amusement. See, our ranch had stood on that land for nearly 70 years. Long before any HOA development popped up next door, Grandpa had refused every offer they made to integrate his ranch into their neat little suburban bubble. He didn't like rules that told him when his grass was too tall or when his rooster could crow. But the HOA didn't like him either. They called his barn an eyesore. They said his tractor was lowering property values. So when that boss, Mr. Dale Harper, decided to park right in the middle of Grandpa's front pasture, he wasn't just trespassing. He was declaring war. Grandpa didn't storm over there. He didn't shout or wave a shotgun. He just grinned, turned around, and walked calmly to the side of the house where his old irrigation control box sat under the eaves. I followed him, confused. "Grandpa, what are you doing?" I asked. He cracked his knuckles. "Giving him a bath he won't forget." The sprinklers hissed to life, one after another, until a dozen iron pipes were spewing freezing well water across the yard. The SUV's glossy finish gleamed for about 5 seconds before the mud hit. Then the water started pooling. Tires sank. The HOA Enforcement Director badge on the door started to peel. We stood on the porch sipping lemonade, watching the show unfold like a slow-motion disaster movie. Harper burst out of the house across the street, furious, red-faced, waving his phone like a weapon. He shouted something about legal action and vandalism. Grandpa just waved back cheerfully. By noon, the SUV looked like it had gone off-roading through a swamp. But Grandpa didn't turn off the sprinklers, not even when Harper called the cops, because Grandpa knew something the HOA boss didn't. And what happened when the police arrived turned this muddy standoff into a full-blown neighborhood spectacle. By the time the sheriff's cruiser rolled up the dirt road, half the neighborhood had gathered along the fence line. Mums in yoga pants, dads holding coffee mugs, and a few kids cheering every time one of the sprinklers smacked the black SUV with another blast of water. It was like a country fair, except the main attraction was the HOA boss losing his mind in Grandpa's front yard. Sheriff Collins stepped out of his car slow and steady, one boot at a time, the gravel crunching beneath him. He was an old friend of Grandpa's. They'd served in the same reserve unit back in the day. You could tell he recognized Grandpa the second he saw him, because that knowing half smile spread across his weathered face. "Well, I'll be," the sheriff said, pushing his hat up. "Frank, you finally found a way to wash your front lawn." A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd. The HOA boss, dripping wet and furious, stomped through the mud toward the sheriff. "Sheriff, arrest him! He's damaging private property. That's my vehicle." The sheriff looked at him calmly. "Your vehicle?" "Yes, I parked here because this land is under HOA jurisdiction," Harper snapped, waving a clipboard like a sword. "He's been in violation for months. Unapproved fencing. Livestock visible from the street. Unregistered barn color." Grandpa interrupted with a chuckle. "This here's county land, son. HOA ends about 40 feet that way," he said, pointing to a faded wooden fence post. Sheriff Collins pulled a folded map from his cruiser, smoothed it out on the hood, and ran his finger along the property line. "He's right, Dale. Always has been." You could almost hear Harper's confidence deflate. He tried one more time. But he flooded my vehicle." The sheriff tilted his head. "I see no flood. I see sprinklers. His sprinklers. On his land. Don't tell me you parked on private property without checking, Dale." The crowd was eating it up. Phones out. Cameras rolling. Harper's face was redder than a stop sign. Grandpa didn't even need to say another word. He just tipped his hat and went back to his rocking chair. The sheriff gave Harper a final look. "Best get a tow truck, son. That mud's not getting any drier." As Harper stormed off, the sprinklers kept spinning, the sun catching every drop like diamonds. Grandpa leaned over to me and said quietly, "Nothing like a little irrigation justice." But what came next made this neighborhood feud go viral, because Harper wasn't done fighting. If there's one thing the HOA hated more than tall grass, it was embarrassment, and Harper had just been humiliated in front of the entire neighborhood. So naturally he doubled down. 2 days later, Grandpa's mailbox overflowed with letters, fines, warnings, and formal notices stacked so high they looked like a bad poker hand. Harper wasn't just angry, he was out for revenge. The man even taped a bright orange property in violation sign to Grandpa's fence, like some kind of scarlet letter. Grandpa didn't say a word. He just folded the letters neatly, tucked them under a paperweight shaped like a cow, and went about his chores as usual. He fed the chickens, fixed the barn door, and of course, made sure the sprinklers were in perfect working order. But I could tell something was brewing behind that calm expression. Grandpa wasn't the kind of man to start a fight, but he sure knew how to end one. 3 nights later, the plan kicked off. It started when Harper called an emergency HOA meeting at the clubhouse. He invited half the neighborhood, anyone who'd ever complained about Grandpa's ranch. He even promised a legal resolution. While Harper strutted into that clubhouse with his stack of files, Grandpa drove his old Ford pickup down the gravel road, humming softly. I followed, carrying his toolbox. Grandpa, what are we doing? He grinned. Just a little maintenance work, boy. At the far edge of the clubhouse lawn, the HOA's fancy irrigation system was hooked to the same underground water main that crossed Grandpa's property line. Grandpa had installed that main himself back in the 80s, before the HOA even existed, and he still had the control valve key. He opened the box, gave it a little twist and said, "Let's see how they like a bit of ranch rain." Back at the clubhouse, Harper was mid-speech about lawful land stewardship when the sprinklers exploded to life. Dozens of jets fired off at once, drenching the patio, the guests, and most satisfyingly, Harper's brand new PowerPoint projector. Screams, laughter, chaos. Everyone ran for cover. Harper tried to shout over the spray, but slipped on the wet tiles and landed flat in a puddle. Phones were out again. Someone yelled, "Guess karma's on the sprinkler setting today." By morning, the video was everywhere. HOA boss gets soaked. It hit social media like wildfire. Comments flooded in, praising Grandpa as a legend of country justice. But Harper wasn't finished. His pride couldn't handle being a viral joke, and that's when he made his biggest mistake yet. One that would end his HOA reign for good. The HOA boss, Dale Harper, came back with a vengeance. He wasn't laughing anymore. Word was he'd been roasted online for days, memes, reaction videos, even a country song called Sprinkler Justice Blues. So when he marched up to Grandpa's porch that Saturday morning, mud still crusted on his fancy loafers. Everyone knew this was going to be the showdown. Grandpa was whittling a piece of cedar on the porch when Harper stormed up the steps, waving a thick stack of papers. "You think you're clever, old man?" Harper snapped. "Well, I've got the paperwork to have this entire ranch condemned. By Monday, this land will belong to the HOA. Grandpa didn't even look up. He blew a curl of wood shavings off his carving. "You sure about that?" "Oh, I'm sure," Harper said, his voice trembling with anger. "Enjoy your last weekend here." Grandpa stood slowly, eyes sharp now, that calm look gone. "Son, you might want to double-check them papers. You see, my lawyer, who happens to be the county clerk's brother, called me last night." Harper blinked. "What are you talking about?" Grandpa took a folded document from his back pocket and handed it over. "That right there is a certified map of this land. County verified, dated 1968. This property's been listed as agricultural reserve land for 57 years. That means your HOA can't touch it, ever." Harper's confidence cracked like dry wood. His eyes darted across the page, realization setting in. He'd spent weeks filing fines and claims that were legally worthless. "And one more thing," Grandpa said, stepping closer. "All that sprinkler water you were complaining about, it runs straight off my private well. You parked on it. That means you're the one who contaminated my water system. Sheriff's got the report already." As if on cue, a familiar cruiser pulled up. Sheriff Collins stepped out, tipping his hat. "Morning, gentlemen. Got a call about trespassing and property damage. Harper, I'm going to need you to come with me." The crowd gathered again. Neighbors peeking through fences, phones ready. Harper tried to argue, but the sheriff was done listening. The man who once ruled the HOA like a king was escorted off Grandpa's porch, dripping with sweat and humiliation. Grandpa sat back down, picked up his carving knife, and grinned. Ain't no law stronger than common sense and a good water system. That night, the HOA board held an emergency vote. Harper was removed from his position, his SUV towed out of the mud, and the HOA quietly dropped every complaint against Grandpa. From then on, nobody parked on Grandpa's land again. But those sprinklers? Oh, they still came on every morning, just to remind folks who really ran that neighborhood. Enjoying this wild HOA showdown? Hit that subscribe button for more real-life revenge stories that'll make every Karen think twice before crossing the wrong neighbor. Smash that like if Grandpa's sprinkler justice made your day. And drop a comment. What would you have done if someone parked on your land?